Good afternoon. Welcome to the Workday Recap, where we spend about 30 minutes at the end of the workday talking about something that happened in my workday or something that happened in your workday or just something that we found on the internet that sounded interesting to talk about. So, if whatever we're talking about interests you, join in the conversation, jump into the chat, say hello. If you want to write something specifically to me, put at DevMentorDave at the beginning of it. That way I'll see it and we can discuss it. This will be downloaded and uploaded to YouTube later on this evening. So if you're watching this from YouTube, check out the link in the profile for the YouTube channel, and there should be a link for the Twitch stream, and hopefully you can join us in the future at 4 p.m. on a workday. Just a programming note, we will not be here tomorrow, most likely. I keep saying most likely. I'm not planning on doing it. It would just be a whim if I do jump on tomorrow. But it is 4th of July tomorrow, so I am off work. So it is not a work day for me. So no workday recap tomorrow afternoon. So we will be back Saturday for our 2-hour live stream where we'll be looking at some of the issues that we ran into with our WordPress cores issue, being able to connect from our Next.js to our WordPress instance locally. So we'll be taking a look at that, figuring out what was going on there. Excuse me. And then hopefully moving forward with building the new Dev Mentor Dave website, or at least a version of it. I don't know if we'll keep it, but it'll be a version of the devmentordave.com website that will actually push all the way through to live production. So we'll go through that whole process with you guys so you can see that on the Saturday live stream. As we did yesterday, almost said last week, as we did yesterday, I have another question that was posted on the video last night from Mel. So if you do post questions, sometimes I'll answer them right away in the comments, but if there's, I'm trying to get into the habit of actually answering questions live. So when I see those that might be a good topic live, this isn't necessarily a great topic to answer live, but I'm just trying to get used to taking some of those and putting them onto the next day and adding some interaction there. So if you do watch this on YouTube, leave a comment on the YouTube video and let me know what questions you have, what insights you have into whatever it is that we were discussing, and that would be helpful as well. Welcome, Ming. Good to see you. What are you eating? You said you're having dinner. What are you eating? The nice thing about Twitch is it's only a 4-second delay, so it's pretty nice. We'll find out what if he's willing to share. We'll find out what Ming's eating here in a second. Okay, before we do that, let me jump over, and I'm actually going to show the question this time. It's a little bit longer. It actually has a couple of questions in it, but again, I want to kind of get into that process of doing things a little bit differently here on the new Twitch stream. So the question was, if you were on here yesterday, or if you watched the video on YouTube, you saw that we asked Claude a question about the Tron villain because I was talking about MCP, and I thought it sounded familiar. And so we asked it the questions, what was the villain name? And Claude seemed to take a few seconds. And so we have this question from Mel here. It says, it surprised me how long Claude took to answer. Do you think AI is actually making people faster or just teaching them to be more patient and waiting? I will say this. I've actually read some interesting thoughts on this reality that we actually are much more willing to wait for information when it comes to ChatGPT or Claude or these LLMs, right? That we wouldn't have put up with something like Google, right? We expect like a instant Google response with all the different links to things that should answer our question. And I think because we're getting more verbose answers, because we're getting answers that actually tend to answer the question that we're really asking, we're also asking I think, more questions than we are. You know, at least for me, when I generally do a Google search, I might ask a question, but a lot of times I'm just throwing in keywords because I know that that's what Google's looking for. It's looking for keywords, right? And so with AI or with the LLMs, they've almost been introduced to us as a way of getting questions answered. And so I think we tend to give a little bit more time knowing that we're asking something that's a little bit more complicated. And so I do think it depends on what you're talking about, Mel. If you're talking about, you know, making people faster coding, I do think that there are ways that it is helping people do their jobs faster. There's certainly ways that it's helping people do um, aspects of their jobs faster when it comes to things like um, calculating or sifting through information, right? It's definitely saving people time in certain areas of their jobs. But it also is teaching us to be a little bit more patient to get what we want. I think, you know, it's forcing us to recognize that there's more going on behind the scenes. Even though it's a machine, it still has to actually process data. And the fact that it does it as fast as it does is pretty cool. Um, but I think it's not that it's making us wait more. It's just that I think all in all, we understand there's a different paradigm between doing a Google search and doing a query into an LLM. I think we almost naturally understand that that's going to take longer. It's going to be a little bit more of a wait. Now there are things again like the villain of Tron. You'd think that'd be pretty simple, but you know that it is what it is. You know, it still has to sift through the data that it has and figure out the what it thinks is the right answer to the question you're asking. And I think that's something that really important for us to remember is at the end of the day, an LLM like ChatGPT or Claude or Grok or things like that, they're not really thinking. They're using algorithms to try to figure out what is the highest percentage next word or sentence or whatever that seems to fit the context of what you're asking, right? Now it does that very, very well in most cases, right? So, but we have to remember again, it is just guessing, and it's going to lean into the biases that you already have. You know, most of you know that I'm a pastor, and so sometimes I'll play around with it when it comes to like theological conundrums and things like that. And I've noticed that I have to sometimes tell it, hey, are you just telling me what I think, what I want to hear because it matches what I believe, or are you telling me what you think actually is the truth? And the problem is it doesn't really think. It's trying to answer your question in the way that it thinks you will help you the most, in the way that it thinks is most accurate based on what you're looking for. And so we have to be careful that our biases are going to bleed into how we use LLMs, especially from like a search and investigation type standpoint as well. Mel says, I think AI is improving people's skim reading skills, but I'm curious how much AI is actually improving us, or whether it's just wanting so bad to tell ourselves that it's making us faster. Yeah, I mean, I think there are ways that it's making us faster, but there are also ways that it's probably slowing us down. There are probably ways that we are not thinking as much as we should because we're able to get quick answers and because we're able to get quick biased answers at times. So I think we might find ourselves losing some critical thinking in this process. So I think that's fair to question. Um, do you find that you forget about what you're discussing based on a long wait? No, I've never had that before. I think most of my interactions with LLMs, they're still pretty quick. Even if you have to wait for a few seconds, they're still pretty quick. I don't find that messes up with the context of the conversation, so to speak. So anyway, good questions from Mel. I'll probably type up something here as an actual response just to help the Google or the YouTube algorithm a little bit, showing that I actually respond to things. But I wanted to answer those live. Looks like Ming is actually doing was eating rice, marinated chicken, and prawn omelet with rice on the side, I guess. See, I'm not a big fan of rice. I am a fan of omelets, but I'm also not a seafood fan. So you kind of lost me halfway through. I'd eat the chicken. I've never actually had a chicken omelet. That's interesting. I'll have to try that one of these days. I don't know why I've never thought about that, but that's interesting. Okay. So the topic of today, sorry, topic of today, Workday recap is discovery coding dangers. Discovery coding dangers. And uh, Ming says ChatGPT is my senior dev. It's not necessarily bad. You do have to be able to check it, though. Check it up against Grok and see if there's any issues. Or against Claude. Discovery coding dangers. What in the world is discovery coding? Well, this is actually a term that I coined, I guess. I don't know. I've never heard anybody use it before, so I'm going to claim that I coined it. Maybe I didn't. I'm sure somebody smarter than me has said this before. But this actually came up in a conversation with one of my developers today as we're talking about just some of the processes and procedures that we go through, and sometimes that we don't go through, that we should go through. And we were just talking about that and this, and I wrote it down in my handy dandy notebook. If you don't write notes, you're not a real dev. No, I'm just kidding. I've tried for years to do it digitally, and I do a lot of note taking digitally, but I find, especially in conversations, things like that, I tend to write notes down better in a notebook, but then I have to go back and try to figure out what all these scribbles mean. So it can be difficult at times because I don't have very good handwriting, but it keeps me on my toes. So what is discovery coding? The way I describe discovery coding really can often be correlated with what a lot of people think of when they think of vibe coding. So with vibe coding, you're taking an AI, an LLM like Claude or ChatGPT or something like that, and you're basically describing the things that you want and telling it to build what you want it to build, and then making corrections, passing in errors, things like that. Basically just letting it do its thing as the actual developer on a project that you're working on. Generally not a great idea in my experience. I have seen some successful things here and there, but in my experience, most of the way that people do vibe coding is not going to lend itself to a good, solid product. It can be helpful for doing some prototyping and things like that, but it's not necessarily what you want at the end of the day from an actual product that you're going to push live. And so discovery coding, Ming says it's all about efficiency. It's all about efficiency when you're a dev. That's why you type. Yeah, well, I don't know. Writing is helps me remember better, I think, even if I can't read it later. Anyway, so discovery coding is kind of similar to vibe coding in the sense that you're building things kind of as you're going, and you're discovering the requirements as you're going. So the idea is you might have a very general concept, and that may be a whole application. It may be a specific feature in an application, but you have a concept for something that you're going to write, that you're going to code. And so you just begin coding it based off of the concepts that are in your head. And as you go along, you kind of figure out that, I need to add this feature, or I need to add that functionality, or I need to change the way that I'm thinking about using this, or I need to change the whole UI because it doesn't really work the way that I thought it would originally. And so that's what I call discovery coding. And you can almost call it vibe coding without AI. But you could, it's basically same thing as vibe coding if you're using AI. And the problem with that, well, there's multiple problems with that, but what you end up with is a product that takes way too long to develop, a product that doesn't really know what it is, and probably gets you only partway where you want to be, and you don't really know where you are most of the time. So it really is a good reminder when you go down this path how important planning is in the process of doing any type of development. And I've seen and even done this myself uh, when I'm doing something that's for myself, or when I'm doing something that maybe is a freelance project or that I think is a very simple project. Those are the times where I tend to find myself falling into the discovery coding trap, where I think I've got a good idea, a good handle on the concept, or it's just something for myself. So I don't necessarily want to go through the process of planning everything out. Um, or it's something that's freelance, and maybe I don't have a lot of opportunity with the client to really delve into the process of getting all of the requirements that I normally would in a project for, say, the company that I work for. So it happens a lot more than we think it does, especially if you are working in an environment where you don't have a lot of very specific requirements for the tickets that you're working on. You can kind of naturally fall into this discovery coding process. And it's kind of natural because we're problem solvers at heart. And so we think that we need to be problem solvers all the time, right? So we feel like we need to be able to just figure it out. And I've even heard like leads tell developers just figure it out. I think I might have even told developers to just figure it out from one point in time or another. We have that tendency where we'll just figure it out. We'll figure out how to do it along the way. It can't be that difficult, right? Well, it does lend itself to several problems. One is scope creep. So more than likely, if you're doing discovery coding, you probably don't have a good scope in the first place. But if you're doing discovery coding, you're certainly going to run into situations where you as the developer are going to create scope creep, or your client, if you're just doing some very high level interactions, they're going to start introducing scope creep because they'll have more ideas about different things that are not part of the original plan. And so scope creep is one of the main reasons why you don't want to use discovery coding. You want to make sure you plan things out well, and in advance, as much as you can. So usually with discovery coding, there's no clear MVP, right? There's no clear minimum viable product. So you don't really know necessarily when you're done. And I think for me, that's the biggest issue, especially when it comes to time management and the scope creep, is you don't know when you're actually done with the project. And I've had many projects, unfortunately, that have gone down the path of discovery coding at times, and we didn't know when we were done. And eventually you end up having a conversation with the client being like, okay, we need a definition of done. We need to know when this thing is complete so that we can actually finish and be done and give you a final bill, or whatever the case may be, right? So you tend to not have a good understanding of MVP when you're doing discovery coding. Again, that then leads you mostly to being over time, which lends to being over budget, depending on how you manage that project and the budgeting of that project. Clients get upset when you're over budget, right? You're often going to be over budget even with planning, but without planning, it's almost impossible to stay under budget without planning. And so this discovery coding really takes you down a path that you're going to go over time and over budget pretty quickly, usually. Another issue with this is a lot of times you'll end up with tons and tons of technical debt. And this is one of the things that people are dealing a lot with when it comes to vibe coding, especially, is just letting the machine build stuff really is a bad idea if it's not well planned out and well executed, and using good commands and processes in that production. Even with AI, you're going to end up with tons of technical debt that may be okay right now, but either you're going to have to completely redo the whole thing, or you're going to spend a lot of time cleaning it up in the future. And especially, it's the same thing is true with discovery coding. You're going to end up with a lot of technical debt. Another issue is when you're discovering coding. I mean, again, you tend to do this when it's just you. But if you ever have to bring somebody onto a project, you don't have a lot of documentation, probably haven't documented why you did certain things um, in conversations with the client, things like that. So it's often very difficult to bring somebody else on board onto a project, even if it's just the client. Get handing things over and giving them enough information. Trying to document all of that stuff without having planned it out can be really not good, right? So, and then another thing I mentioned earlier, you can have really inconsistent UI UX. Um, when you're making decisions on the fly, you're going to do even something as simple as tables differently from one section to another. That's one of the things that we were talking about earlier today. Is if you look at a project that kind of uses more of this discovery coding process, you're going to see, there are UIs that should look generally similar, the same, and yet there's nuances about them that also keep you from having reproducible code, reusable code, and that's again, you're kind of, it's technical debt. You're shooting yourself in the foot, and it's just it's generally not going to be productive. Um, let's see. Ming says, when I was a beginner, I never used to plan how to architect a project. I know what you mean. Yeah, I mean, and honestly, I don't know that a lot of like boot camps and things like that do a really good job of actually um, teaching you how to plan. And again, I mean, if they did all the things that I would like to see them do, it would be more than a 5 month, 6 month boot camp. It would probably be at least a year, which would be more expensive and it'd be harder to sell, right? I mean, so you have to limit yourself at some point if you want a product that you can sell to people trying to learn to write code. Um, but one of the things that I think would be super beneficial, maybe in like a secondary course or something like that, is helping junior devs learn how to create a project the right way, how to plan it out. And we started doing that a little bit at the beginning of the Deep Pockets project. If you go on YouTube, you can see that project listed out in a playlist, I believe. We did end up abandoning it because I just lost time and energy doing that. But we did spend some time planning out some things, but we didn't even still do that really to the degree that you should on any project. And again, this is hard to do when it comes to, it's hard to force yourself to do this when it comes to working on your own projects, when it comes to working on freelance projects that you're doing on the side, you don't have a ton of time. And so there is this natural tendency to jump into discovery coding where you'll just figure it out as you go. And that almost always fails. That almost always either leads you to a place where you have to hit the pause button and say, we need to have some discussions and make some plans, or you just never actually launch the product. You never actually get it done. It never gets to a place where you feel like we have actually accomplished this. So that's something I wanted to bring up because it came up in conversations today. And that's with, some senior level devs. So this is not with junior level devs who were talking about some of these issues. So it happens everywhere. It doesn't just happen in your little closet with your computer, right? It happens in large firms because people get busy. They don't take the time to do things well, to do things the right way. And, that's where a lot of times technical debt comes from and budget overruns and things like that. And we don't always take the time to figure out why that is. We just kind of assume that it was extenuating circumstances, right? We like to blame the client, or we like to blame, just issues. We had people sick, or, all kinds of things that we can come up with reasons why projects are behind. And I'm not saying that those things are not valid, but I think a lot of times what happens is we slip into this discovery coding mode, and we just kind of assume that we're going to figure it out as we go, and we don't take the proper steps necessary to ensure that we spend our time well doing the right things. And yeah, I mean, there may be times where, you know, a client just may not be available, or they don't have the right person available to answer the questions that we need when we want to do it. That's a reality, and that's something that, you know, hopefully you can get better at, even laying that groundwork at the beginning of a project. If you're doing that for yourself, or you're doing that for freelance gigs or something like that, laying that foundation, laying that groundwork with the client before you even get started, of what that process is going to need to look like in order to be successful. And it's hard because clients don't see applications being built when they're just in meetings all the time. And so it's hard to help them understand the value of those meetings and the value of getting the information up front and planning up front, even doing like designs. Clients, they like designs because it helps them see, but at the end of the day, they don't feel like they're really making progress until they see something that they can actually interact with. And so it's very difficult at times to get clients to get on board with the process. But if you can help them understand that that process actually will save them time and money down the road, when you can create good tickets that a developer can look at, know exactly what he needs to do or what she needs to do, and actually get in there and do it, it is so much faster. You can break it down into smaller pieces. You can get those pieces done faster. They can get approved faster. They can get into the demo faster. It actually flows so much better if we're willing to plan and find out all the things that we need to make the plan and write the tickets and go through that process. So I want to encourage you, as a junior developer, as a senior developer, wherever you're at in your development journey, whether you're working on a personal project, whether you're working on a freelance project or something for your company, don't just fall into the discovery coding process. Don't just assume you'll figure it out as you go. Force yourself, force others in that process to make the process work correctly, to figure out what you need, so that when you sit down, whether you're doing it manually or whether you're doing it using a lot of AI, LLM interactions, you can describe that. You know, you can, an LLM is just like a developer when it comes to writing code, in the sense that the more information and clarity you give it, the better it will be the first time. And it's the same way with developers. In for yourself individually, the more time you plan it out and think about it, the better your first iteration is going to be for you or for your client. So those are just some of the dangers that I've seen, that I've noticed when it comes to what I call discovery coding, which again is just kind of coding with the assumption that you'll figure it out as you go, not taking the time to plan out as much as you need to do the tickets. Now, again, you're always going to be limited on how much time you have to plan, based on the client, based on your own time, and when deadlines are and things like that. So you need to learn to be efficient in that process too. But if you can be efficient in that, then your coding will be much more efficient and much more accurate in the end, and you'll be much more likely to land on budget and on time for the project that you're working on. Ming says the vast majority don't. They just teach. Probably talking about boot camps. Yeah, they don't teach best practices unless you go to the Code Steen boot camp. I've never heard of that. Code Steen boot camp. Mm-hmm. Is it Code Steam? Code Steam boot camp. I don't know. Maybe I misunderstand what you're talking about. Anyway, I guess there's a boot camp that does more, which is cool. But yeah, that's my biggest gripe against boot camps, is they just don't really teach you enough. They teach you enough to make you feel like you can write code. In fact, second, the second junior dev that I mentored actually told me he wished that he could go back and do the boot camp again, having gone through it, so that he could pick up on the patterns and other things that he really needed in the real world job. Besides just the basics of writing code, right? So again, I think it probably most boot camps need to be at least doubled in order to give you real world experience and training and things like that. So the code scene bootcamp. The instructor is really good. He's a professional dev. Student graduates as mid-levels. Interesting. I'll have to see if I can find that. If you can send me a link to that, Ming, either here or in the Discord or something like that, and let me know, because it doesn't. My Google search didn't come up with my results. That's for Mel. It came up fast, but it didn't come up with the results that were applicable, from what I can tell. So, Coach Steen, I don't know. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thanks for jumping in, Ming especially for jumping into the chat. As always, if you're able to catch us live from 4 p.m. to 4:30 Central United States time, jump into the chat, say hello, share your opinions, share your experiences, ask your questions. And if you're watching this later on YouTube, leave a comment, and I will do my best to see those and respond to those, hopefully in a timely manner. If it's something interesting, we'll throw it out at the beginning of our live stream the next day, like we did today again. So hopefully that was helpful to you. Again, we'll not be here tomorrow, as we'll be off for the 4th of July, but we will be back on Saturday for our 2-hour live stream on Saturday. So we'll see you all then. Have a great rest of your evening.